New Age is just around the corner, and with New Age just around the corner, that means that 6th job is also right around the corner. But that also means that there is a brand new upgrading system, and that upgrading system is going to be referred to as Hexa and Hexa Skills. So in this video, we're going to be going over everything that you need to know about this new upgrading system. We're going to go over where to farm items, what to use them on, and how much you actually need to get to certain thresholds in this system. Hopefully by the end of this video, you have all the information that you need to upgrade this system successfully. So with that being said, let's get right into the video. So first things first, there are going to be two branches to this upgrading system. One is going to be Hexa Skill, and the other is going to be the more complicated version called Hexa. We're going to first start off with Hexa Skill, as this is going to pertain to more players and be appealing to more players as well. Hexa Skill also gives you much more final damage versus the Hexa that costs a lot more and gives you a lot less final damage. The Hexa Skill is made up of 4 branches. This is going to consist of your skill core, which is going to be that big origin skill that all classes have, your mastery core, which is going to enhance 4th job skills or below. And just a quick side note, to enhance the mastery core, you must have these to level 50 in the V matrix in order to upgrade them. Enhancement cores, which are going to enhance 5th job skills, and then common 6th job cores. These aren't out yet. The common 6th job cores are essentially going to be things like decent combat orders, decent SI, SE, rope lift, all those kind of skills that every class in the game gets, that is all shared together. So now that we know what this actually is, what do we actually need to upgrade this system? Well, in order to upgrade the system, we are going to need an item called Soul Urda. And the way to obtain Soul Urda is going to be 1, from hunting mobs with Sacred Force, or number 2, killing bosses. And not just any bosses, but the more difficult tier of bosses. I'm going to put the list of bosses on the screen right now, but these bosses are going to consist from things like Hard Lotus all the way down to Calling. Now, of course, the harder the difficulty of the boss, the more Soul Urda you can obtain. Bosses can drop 50 all the way up to 600 Soul Urda energy. So this is a very good way of claiming Soul Urda energy quickly without spending a lot of time. The lowest tier boss is going to be Lotus, and the highest tier boss giving the most amount of Soul Urda energy is going to be Extreme Black Mage. Now, even though these bosses and mobs drop Soul Urda energy, you're going to need 1000 Soul Urda energy to actually obtain 1 Soul Urda. You will have a UI on your screen that gives you a gauge of how much you are out of 1000 to filling up this gauge. Once you get to 1000 Soul Urda energy, you'll be able to obtain 1 Soul Urda. But Soul Urda isn't the only thing that you actually need to upgrade this system. You will also need something called Soul Urda fragments. Now, these Soul Urda fragments are only obtained from monsters with Sacred Force, so you're not able to obtain this item from bosses. So now that we know the materials that we need to gather in order to actually upgrade the 6th job system, how much is it actually going to cost us to upgrade the 6th job system? So I'm going to put a chart on the screen right now that actually shows how much Soul Urda and how many Soul Urda fragments you will need to upgrade each Hexa skill. So one thing that you'll notice on this chart as well is that there are certain level brackets where it costs you a significantly more amount of Soul Urda and Soul Urda fragments. But there is a reason for this. You do gain a substantially more amount of final damage. The level thresholds where you will actually get a bonus is going to be at level 10. You will gain 20% ID. Level 20, you will gain 20% boss damage. And at level 30, you will gain 30% ID and 30% boss damage. Thus, the more expensive cost at these level brackets. But just so you have a general idea of how much Soul Urda and Soul Urda fragments you will need to completely max this system. In order to max your 4th and 5th job Hexa cores, you are going to need 720 Soul Urda, and you will need 20,000 Soul Urda fragments, so quite a lot there. And in order to only max your 6th job, you will need 356 Soul Urda and 10,000 Soul Urda fragments, totaling 1,076 Soul Urda and about 30,000 Soul Urda fragments. We don't know how much it's going to cost to actually upgrade or max your common 6th job cores, but that will be probably announced in the next upcoming December KMS update. So now that we've gone over the more important of the two, let's go into Hexa and what this actually is. So when you open up your Hexa UI, you're going to actually have to activate a Hexa. When you activate your Hexa, you're going to have to choose 1 main stat and 2 secondary stats. These are going to give you the option between crit damage, boss damage, ID, damage, attack, and all stat. As a side note, the all stat does not scale, but the attack does. Secondary stat will always be half of the value of what the main stat is. So as an example of this, 7% crit damage being your main stat is going to give you 3.5% crit damage if you were to put it as a secondary stat. So just remember, your main stat is always going to be the highest value, and your secondary stat is going to be half the value of your main stat, depending on whatever you choose for the main and secondary stat. You also cannot do the same main stat as your secondary stat. So if you choose crit damage for your main stat, you cannot choose it as well for a secondary stat. Activating a Hexa stat is not free though. It is going to cost you 5 Soul Urta and 10 Soul Urta fragments. So now once you've actually activated your Hexa stat, you want to level it up. And this system is a lot of RNG. You're going to have 3 potential options when you level up your Hexa stat every single time. You're going to have a 35% chance to level up your main stat, and then a equal split between 32.5% to level up one of your secondary stats. This isn't free though. It is going to cost you 10 Soul Urta every single time you try to level it up. Of course, the goal in the ideal situation is to get 10 main stat and 10 secondary stat flat, so you have 10-10. But this is nearly impossible and it takes an insane amount of time, and for 99% of players it is 100% not worth trying to min-max this. So for a general idea, most people will probably settle with 6 or 5 on their main stat and any secondary stat that they get for the time being until the Hexa skills are actually maxed. Just for example, if you do roll your Hexa stat and you get really bad RNG, you can always reset it at level 10. This is going to cost 10 mil miso. So if, for example, you try to roll your Hexa stat and you only get 2 on your main stat and you decide this isn't really that good at RNG, I want to re-roll it, you have the option to reset it completely back to 0 and then try again. Once you reach level 20 on your Hexa stat, you can set this as a preset and save it forever. This gives you the ability to make a Hexa stat for mobbing and then also make a Hexa stat for bossing. There's a little bit more information with Hexa stat, but to be honest, it's not super important, especially for most players right now. The most important thing is trying to get your Hexa skills leveled up as soon as possible and trying to put most of your Soul Urta and Soul Urta fragments into the Hexa skills themselves. Hexa stat is just a secondary thing that you work on, and it's not super relevant for a lot of final damage. But that is going to wrap it up for the 6th job upgrading system. I really hope this video helps a ton of you understand how the 6th job system works. Remember, this system is a very long grind, so don't rush it, enjoy it, have fun with it. This is also a ton of final damage, and remember, we are only 20% into the 6th job itself. So if your class doesn't feel like it's super strong right now, remember that it can always get buffs in the future for the other Hexa skills that it will receive. But with that being said, you guys, that is going to wrap it up for today. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and until next time, I will see you all in the next one. Take it easy. Peace.